talking to you about 1984 and ideas from the Critical Anthology. And the most important thing to say is that the ideas you'll get from the critics that are in a little 1984 document library on SharePoint, they are much better to engage with. But you might throw a few of these in, and you'll certainly want to write about these ideas as well. So here are the questions. Two questions on Julia and a wider question. There are other women. There's Catherine, there's his mother, there's a prole woman, there's Mrs. Parsons, the next door neighbour. So there are other ones that you can write about as well as Julia that you might want to do that one for. So is Julia admirable? Is she a challenge to traditional representations of women? They're nice too. So, texts are often criticised for focusing on male protagonists while women have marginal roles, and that is certainly true. That is certainly what 1984 does. You might say that the real relationship is between Winston, O'Brien, and sort of Big Brother in the background. That's the real person who wants to please, his real relationship, and the other, his relationship with Julia is part of that. It's very interesting in that way. I got that idea from a critic that is on SharePoint. So in our novel, Winston Smith's the protagonist, and you might say the antagonist is Big Brother or O'Brien. The narrator isn't Winston Smith. The narrator is a third-person narrator, very much focused on Winston's worldview and what he's thinking, and not explaining what any of the other characters are thinking. And that's a huge point for you to write in your essay. So reward characters is interesting here. So quite often at the end of a film, the protagonist will be given a woman that they've fancied all along, but they've just saved the earth from being overtaken by some dastardly antagonist, and they get the woman. I'm talking James Bond, aren't I? So is Julia a reward character? Not really. She doesn't function in that way. He doesn't overcome adversity and get Julia. She's sort of part of the adversity, so we won't write very much about that. Be careful on that. Characters involved with love and those with wider social roles, pretty much all the female characters, it's not love, it's sex. And that's their involvement. And the intellectual side of it is between O'Brien and Winston. So there's quite a good point there for you. Bechdel test. I don't think two women do talk to each other in this novel at all, but hopefully you can find a bit and prove me wrong. So, acts that we usually think of as being completely private turn out to be an extension of the public sphere. This is massive in this novel. So he has sex with his wife, and she is having sex in a way to please the party and to be dutiful. So the most private act, you might say, is a completely politically determined act. And then even, well, particularly his having sex with Julia is itself an act of rebellion, something that she does to rebel. It's private, and they're both deeply political acts at the same time. So there's a lot of points to be made about this area. I think I've said that. A lot of people might think that George Orwell, not on purpose, he's writing for the general public, but he does assume a male experience of the world. And I'm thinking about those, obviously, about those sex scenes. If I go on to the male gaze bit, Julia is looked at, she's got lips like this and eyes like this, and the body, actually says the body, and you are inside Winston's head processing her. I think it's pretty much a man writing to men, this novel. but you don't need to write about that if you can't find good bits. So what's interesting here is it's a dystopian novel. You write about it being dystopian, and he's changed society, although he's really writing a mirror of what's going on between Russia, America, can't remember the other one, at the time. So he can invent whatever he likes to happen in this world, and he's invented the television that can look at you. Oh, the irony. But you might also say that he could have changed the relationships between men and women however he wanted. He could have had women exactly like men, or women doing all the work and men staying at home. He could have done what he wanted, but instead he's got the men doing the intellectual stuff and the women doing the sex. So that's quite an interesting. I don't think he's doing it on purpose. I don't think he thought about it. I think it's just reflecting his subconscious bias. So some stereotypes of women, and there's a whole question on that. You could see Julia as the immoral and dangerous seductress who takes Winston, who endangers Winston and causes the problems in the rest of the novel. You could even see her as the antagonist. Woman is eternally dissatisfied shrew. We've certainly got his wife behaving in that way. I'm not thinking of any beautiful women needing rescuing in this novel. He doesn't do that one, I think. And self-sacrificing angel, I can't remember about the mother and Mrs. Parsons. You might have a look at them in that way. So that's not for us. Yeah, dependencies to indulgence and reverence. We like the women who need help. That's not for us in this novel. Independence leads to dislike and rejection. Julia certainly is independent and does what she wants, but she's not, in my eyes, a likeable character. She's not a sympathetic character. I'm on Winston's side and she's getting in the way. So female independence gets a strongly negative connotation. And so what feminist critics have done is refuse. Say, all right, I can see all, well, you're getting me to dislike this character, Julia, but I refuse. She understands her own sexuality, she rebels, she takes action. I'm going to find her to have positive connotations, even though I can see, George Orwell, that you wrote her pretty negatively. That is a star level of that debate. So the strong, independent, maybe rebellious. Oh no, I just said that. So no, she's not very sympathetic, but you can refuse to accept her that way and insist that you admire her. That's a question about admirable. And you can write about Winston. He, in some way, not being masculine enough, not living up to the O'Brien Big Brother versions. You might write about that. It doesn't particularly fit into your questions though, so let's just whiz on. So here we do have different classes and backgrounds in this novel, but as I've said before, they're all in 19th century novels, the female characters are all looking for marriage. In this, it's more about sex. And we have got different backgrounds. So there's prostitutes, the prole woman, doesn't even get a name. So there's plenty to write about in that area. And you might say this whole novel, it's not about gender, it's about political control and controlling the minds of the population. At the same time, it is about gender, like subconsciously about gender. And the women are dangerous, and the women are agents of control in some ways, his wife. And you might say the whole novel, just because we subconsciously, I didn't even notice all that when I first read it. I read it very politically about governments controlling the population. And it just goes to show what I've been conditioned to accept and what films, more than books maybe, what films can do to perpetuate the way we all think. Okay, I hope that's given you some ideas.